Antarctica's glaciers are often seen as sleeping giants, but satellite records through 2000 and 24-25 show surface melt and ice loss, accelerating well beyond previous expectations. Some regions have already experienced record melt days and unusual patterns of snow accumulation, underscoring how quickly conditions are shifting. This rapid change is now a major driver of global sea level rise, reshaping coastlines and threatening millions of lives worldwide. Yet much of the story lies below the surface. Hidden processes beneath the ice are reshaping scientific projections in ways few anticipated. In this video, you'll see 15 discoveries from 2022 to 2025 that reveal how Antarctica's secrets connect climate change, lost history, and concealed landscapes, starting with a ship that once symbolized human survival against the ice. Shackleton's Endurance, 3 years after discovery. 3 years on from its discovery, Shackleton's Endurance remains one of the most striking reminders of human ambition caught in the grip of Antarctica. Found resting nearly upright in the Weddell Sea in 2022, the wreck stunned archaeologists and historians with its extraordinary state of preservation. For more than a century, it lay hidden, untouched beneath shifting sea ice. Now it has become the focus of a new challenge, not locating the ship, but ensuring it can be studied safely and responsibly without being disturbed. The first step has been to clarify why the Endurance deserves protection far beyond its dramatic survival tale. Shackleton's Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition of 1914-17 ended in catastrophe when the ship was trapped and crushed by pack ice. Yet every crew member lived, thanks to a desperate open-boat voyage, eventual rescue, and a leadership story still retold worldwide. Today, the wreck fills gaps in written accounts. Structural changes visible in the 3D scans confirm that the crew attempted repeated repairs and reinforcements even while accepting that the voyage could not succeed. Subtle details preserved in the timbers and scattered equipment now serve as physical confirmation of what diaries and memoirs once only described. In this sense, the ship carries the material record of both an expedition's failure and its improbable survival. Since 2022, research teams have taken advantage of advances in subsea imaging to map the Endurance in unprecedented detail. Using remotely operated vehicles equipped with cameras and sonar, they generated scans from more than 25,000 high-resolution images. These were assembled into a full 3-dimensional model of the 144-foot vessel, showing toppled masts and sections where the deck collapsed under ice pressure, but also revealing intact compartments, recognizable fittings, and visible lettering along the hull. Anyone studying the scans can trace not just the external form of the ship, but also its fine workmanship, lending additional context to the engineering practices of the early 20th century. Because the wreck has remained in such stable condition, conservationists have embraced an in-situ strategy. The UK Antarctic Heritage Trust, working with Historic England, developed a conservation management plan that was introduced in 2024 at the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting. Its core principle is clear: the wreck should stay where it is. Lifting it or retrieving objects would almost certainly cause damage, while also stripping away the ecological and historical value the site has acquired in its submerged environment. Instead, full digital archiving through 3D scans, detailed imagery, and systematic data release is the preferred approach. That way, records are safeguarded even if changing conditions eventually begin to alter the wreck itself. Preservation is not only about preventing human interference. As climate trends slowly reshape the Weddell Sea, new risks emerge. The wreck currently sits within a protected historic site and monument, but the designated zone covers only a 500-meter radius. Recent assessments recommended that this be extended to 1,500 meters so that all scattered remains on the seabed fall under the same legal protection. Beyond that, discussions are underway for formally designating the location as an Antarctic specially protected area. If approved, this would introduce stricter rules against unauthorized visits, artifact recovery, or disruptive fishing activity in the surrounding waters. Part of what makes the Endurance so exceptional is not just the preservation of its wood and fittings, but the community of organisms that now live on it. The hull and surrounding debris fields host sponges, sea anemones, starfish, and delicate filter feeders, all thriving in a place once considered biologically barren. Marine biologists welcome the site as a natural laboratory. It functions as an artificial reef, enabling long-term studies of colonization in some of the coldest waters on Earth. Continued monitoring is essential because while the immediate rate of decay is slow, ocean chemistry and warming trends could alter these fragile ecosystems and in turn begin to affect the wreck. Data released from recent expeditions supports this dual focus on cultural and biological value. Each visit must follow regulations requiring data to be shared publicly within 2 years, ensuring that knowledge about the site does not remain locked in private archives. This policy reflects a deliberate choice to treat the wreck as part of a global commons, heritage, history, and science held in trust for all. It also aligns with broader protections under the Antarctic Treaty System that aim to prevent commercialization or exploitation of artifacts. The balance between heritage and science becomes visible in the way researchers now use the 3D model. Engineers compare the ship's resilience against ice pressure with modern vessel designs, while historians correlate the physical record with accounts from Shackleton's crew. Both approaches benefit from the accuracy of the scan, which is so detailed it records the grain of exposed beams. These tools offer ways of studying the past without disturbing the site itself. They also let the wider public interact with the wreck virtually, expanding access to a story that has long captured global imagination without sending people into one of the world's most sensitive environments. Standing back from the technical details, what is striking is how the Endurance underscores a larger principle. Antarctica holds artifacts of immense value, but their preservation now rests on restraint rather than recovery. Unlike famous shipwrecks in warmer waters that were razed or scavenged, the Endurance is being left in place. Its story is accessible through open digital archives, not glass cases. This approach reflects a growing recognition that sites on the continent are not possessions of a single nation or institution, but parts of a shared human record. Ongoing surveys in 2024 and 2025 bring cautious reminders that the ship's setting is not static. Ice sheets in the Weddell Sea shift with the seasons, slightly modifying currents and pressures at the seabed. Sensors have recorded very small changes in the orientation of surrounding debris. None of these observations point to imminent collapse, but they illustrate why conservationists stress vigilance. Preservation is not an act completed once. It is continuous assessment in an environment that resists permanence. As it stands today, the Endurance remains one of the best preserved wooden shipwrecks ever documented. Its survival offers historians tangible links to Shackleton's expedition, while scientists use it to track environmental change and marine colonization in Antarctic waters. The combined efforts of archaeologists, historians, engineers, and policymakers are ensuring that the wreck endures in ways far different from what Shackleton could have imagined. The work around the Endurance also emphasizes a broader reality. Even in regions that appear empty or lifeless, Antarctica conceals thriving forms of activity. Some of that activity is cultural, in the form of shipwrecks and human histories preserved in ice. Other parts are biological, taking place in conditions that for most people seem impossible to support life. It is those hidden ecosystems, far beneath the surface, that present the next set of remarkable discoveries. Microbes that thrive in dark ice caverns. In 2025, one of the most significant breakthroughs in Antarctic science emerged from a place no larger than a modest pond, but sealed beneath nearly a kilometer of ice. At Subglacial Lake Mercer, part of the SALSA project, researchers retrieved samples that showed entire microbial communities thriving in complete darkness. This was only the second time after the Willan study in 2013 that a subglacial lake had been reached and sampled under strict clean access protocols without contamination, making the results both rare and highly credible. Genetic sequencing of the material revealed an astonishing range of organisms, many genetically distinct from anything known in surface or marine environments, shaped instead by long-term isolation and scarce energy conditions. Far from barren, these icy depths contain water bodies linked through channels and fractures, where oxygen is limited and temperatures remain below seawater's freezing point. Inside them, microbes continue to flourish. They do not rely on sunlight. Instead, they live by oxidizing inorganic materials such as methane, hydrogen, iron, and sulfur leached from ancient rock. Where a surface ecosystem is powered almost entirely by photosynthesis, these organisms operate through chemoautotrophs, taking energy directly from reactions with minerals and gases. This metabolic flexibility allows them to switch strategies depending on oxygen availability, keeping communities stable despite the harshest constraints. One of the most notable aspects of the salsa samples comes from the genomes themselves. Sequencing revealed lineages that fall outside previously defined microbial families, representing entirely new branches of the tree of life. Proteins in some of these microbes remain functional at freezing temperatures where standard enzymes would fail. Others display unusual membrane chemistries that provide resilience against ice damage. Combined, these adaptation strategies illustrate not just survival, but long-term success under energy-limited conditions. They offer clues to how microbial life persists in some of Earth's most unwelcoming habitats. Crucial to the credibility of these discoveries is the technology used to obtain the samples. Researchers employed hot water drilling under sterile conditions, ensuring no surface microbes entered the pristine environment. Sampling lines, storage containers, and instruments were sterilized to eliminate contamination risks. These safeguards mean that when DNA signatures show new microbial genomes, they can be traced to the lake itself rather than artifacts of the sampling process. Such rigor is essential in polar microbiology, where critics are quick to question whether rare life signatures might have been introduced inadvertently. SALSA's strict anti-contamination approach provides strong validation for its results. These findings also refine our sense of how stable such ecosystems might be across geologic history. The communities recovered from Mercer show metabolic patterns that suggest continuity for tens of thousands of years, well beyond the timescales of human observation. With replication rates measured not in hours, but sometimes in years, evolutionary change occurs on slow but steady tracks. Yet despite this, the communities are dynamic. Byproducts from one group of microbes become nutrients for another, producing small, resilient food webs. These webs persist against fluctuations in oxygen, water chemistry, and pressure, all factors that might otherwise destabilize isolated systems. Beyond biology, the research has environmental significance. Subglacial microbes actively contribute to global biogeochemical cycles. As they consume methane or generate carbon dioxide under the ice, they influence greenhouse gas storage and release. If climate change accelerates ice loss and exposes these reservoirs, microbial activity could alter local and global feedback loops. That makes understanding their metabolism not only a question of ecology, but also one of climate modeling, tying Antarctic microbiology directly to projections of Earth's future atmosphere. There are also lessons about Earth's past. During periods known as Snowball Earth, events hundreds of millions of years ago, when glaciers extended to tropical latitudes, life may have only survived in isolated refuges. Subglacial environments like Lake Mercer serve as modern analogues, showing that ecosystems can persist without sunlight for vast spans of time. The microbes offer living proof that life can find ways to endure during global freeze events, sustaining a biological thread through times when conditions on the surface might otherwise have eliminated it. The astrobiological implications are equally important, but must be presented cautiously. Microbes beneath Antarctic ice serve as useful terrestrial analogues for potential habitats on icy moons such as Europa or Enceladus. Both worlds are thought to harbor subsurface oceans sealed beneath ice shells, with possible chemical energy sources at the seabed. While not identical, Antarctica provides the closest Earth-based comparison, demonstrating that life does not require sunlight so long as chemical energy and liquid water are present. For space scientists, Subglacial Antarctic sites function almost as training grounds for theories about extraterrestrial habitability. What makes this discovery compelling is not only what it tells us about resilience, but also what it offers as a toolkit for science and technology. Some of the enzymes identified from Antarctic microbes remain active at sub-zero temperatures, presenting possible applications ranging from food preservation to green chemistry. Other metabolic pathways might prove relevant to bioremediation in polluted or cold environments. Each adaptation represents both a survival tactic in Antarctica and a potential innovation beyond it. Proper study, however, comes with responsibilities. Researchers emphasize that continued exploration of subglacial sites must avoid unexpected contamination. Introduced organisms could overwhelm native microbial communities not evolved to compete with surface species. For this reason, planning new projects requires not just drilling technology, but strict international oversight, ensuring that scientific curiosity does not damage ecosystems that have persisted independently for millennia. The conservation mindset applied to wrecks like the Endurance now extends to microscopic ecology as well. By 2025, further genetic sequencing from subglacial samples continued to highlight novel biochemical strategies, some of which may open avenues for industrial and medical research. But the broader meaning lies in redefining what habitable means on this planet. Instead of relying on sunlight and warmth, life proves capable of existing in deep ice, where darkness and scarcity dominate. It represents an inversion of surface logic. Organisms flourish by extending energy pathways that seem marginal but in aggregate sustain entire communities across hidden networks. Such research reminds us that Antarctica conceals not only cultural history or marine ecosystems, but also records of adaptation written at a microscopic scale. These archives persist in water pockets shielded under kilometers of ice, quietly expanding the boundaries of biology itself. Moving deeper into the ice sheet, the revelations do not stop at invisible cells. The frozen ground also holds evidence of landscapes that once supported life of a completely different kind, ancient ecosystems preserved beneath layers of ice for tens of millions of years, waiting to be uncovered. An ancient forest frozen in time. When drill cores were taken from beneath Antarctica's thick ice sheet, researchers expected to trace climate history and patterns of past sediment deposition. Instead, what emerged was unmistakable evidence of a very different landscape. Fossilized roots preserved in frozen ground, linked together in dense networks that could only have belonged to a long-vanished forest. These were not a few isolated fragments, but the structural traces of trees that once spread their roots into rich soils. They show that Antarctica, now the coldest and driest continent, was once a thriving, green ecosystem. Dating places these remains in the mid-Cretaceous, about 92 to 83 million years ago, a time when dinosaurs were still widespread and when Earth's atmosphere held far higher levels of carbon dioxide than today. Fossil material, including roots, wood fragments, and pollen grains, confirms that swampy forests once flourished in the South Polar region. On top of this, discoveries of amber trapped in ancient mudstones add vivid proof that resin-producing trees flourished in what is now West Antarctica. Together, these finds set Antarctica firmly within a very different global climate regime, when greenhouse conditions extended vegetation into high latitudes. The forests of Cretaceous Antarctica are more than a curiosity. They demonstrate that under high CO2 climates, the poles were capable of sustaining ecosystems comparable to present-day temperate rainforest. Cores contain pollen and spores strongly resembling those from trees and understory plants found in New Zealand today. Ferns, conifers, and angiosperms adapted to abundant rainfall and seasonal light. These indicators suggest that the Antarctic landscape at that time contained dense forest canopies, moss-lined soils, and rivers crossing vegetated valleys. Such a system could hardly exist without a broad diversity of species interacting in stable ecological networks. One critical insight from this evidence is that Cretaceous forests adapted to unique polar conditions. Even in that warm world, Antarctica would still have endured months of polar darkness. Yet fossilized plant tissues and pollen reveal that entire ecosystems managed to adjust to extended night. They hint that photosynthetic pathways and plant structures enabled survival during prolonged light shortages and recovery during extended summer days. This adds to the picture of how greenhouse climates played out at high latitudes, making the poles far warmer and wetter than their positions suggest today. The forest evidence also reflects how sensitive Earth's system is to atmospheric carbon changes. Paleobotanical records indicate that atmospheric CO2 reached levels well above modern concentrations, driving an amplified greenhouse effect that spread heat poleward. Under these conditions, ice was absent and sea levels were dramatically higher. The forests of Antarctica are a geological record showing that with elevated greenhouse gases, even the polar south can transition from an ice sheet to a lush ecosystem. For present-day climate science, they stand as reminders of the scale of change possible when the atmosphere shifts. Importantly, such fossil evidence helps shape models that predict Earth's future. By comparing the vegetation indicators in Antarctic cores with geochemical estimates of Cretaceous CO2, scientists test the accuracy of climate reconstructions at extreme latitudes. These studies also support ice sheet behavior models. If the West Antarctic region once supported forests, then current warming could in theory trigger changes to the ice sheet more abruptly than some models predict. The link between past carbon levels and polar forest expansion anchors computer simulations with physical data, offering researchers a way to refine projections of future Antarctic ice retreat. Additional findings add more detail to this ancient picture. For example, sediment studies from areas like the James Ross Basin and beneath subglacial water bodies contain plant pollens and spores, reinforcing evidence that high-latitude forests persisted across Antarctica for millions of years. These deposits are consistent with widespread coverage, rather than isolated patches, confirming that polar vegetation extended well inland across broad swathes of the continent. By cross-matching evidence from multiple sites, scientists now recognize these forests as part of a global mid-Cretaceous greenhouse world, not an anomaly of one location. The 2023 report by paleobotanist Jocelyn Monroy adds another dimension, evidence of frequent forest fires. Charcoal residues from King George Island suggest that volcanic activity in the region repeatedly ignited vegetation, reshaping parts of the ecosystem. These fires were not one-time accidents, but regular cycles, woven into the rhythms of mid-Cretaceous polar forests. That detail underscores how active and dynamic those environments were, humid, swampy systems, but not free from natural disruption. Even at the edge of the world, forests faced the same disturbances that shape ecosystems elsewhere. Amber discoveries make the forest more tangible. Resin preserved in a 3-meter-long piece of mudstone off West Antarctica dates to the mid-Cretaceous, confirming that trees capable of producing resin thrived in southern polar regions. Inside the amber are microbubbles and preserved structures offering chemical evidence of the organisms that once lived in close contact with the trees. Though ancient DNA never survives over tens of millions of years, the plant fossils, pollen shapes, charcoal fragments, and amber inclusions together tell a consistent story of luxurious polar forests intertwined with rivers, volcanism, and diverse plant life. Rather than taking this simply as a window into the past, scientists use it to understand long-term trajectories of Earth systems. The fossil forests show what becomes possible at CO2 levels similar to those projected for the coming centuries if emissions remain high. Paleobotanical data provide precise benchmarks for testing how sensitive the climate system is to carbon forcing. Each pollen grain adds weight to models linking atmospheric gases to polar ice sheet thresholds, helping researchers evaluate when current warming might begin destabilizing large glaciers. This perspective also emphasizes change over time. After the Cretaceous greenhouse world, Earth gradually cooled. Antarctica drifted farther into isolation, as the Southern Ocean currents surrounded it. Step by step, forests retreated and ice advanced until the continent locked into the frozen state we see today. The fossil roots sealed beneath ice are therefore direct evidence of transition, a green world preserved under the foundations of a frozen desert. They are not only reminders of what once existed, but signals of the planet's capacity to shift dramatically under altered atmospheric conditions. For the public, it can be difficult to picture landscapes of rivers and canopies beneath today's ice sheets. Yet fossil samples make that picture unavoidable. They confirm that for millions of years, Antarctica not only supported forests, but did so even during long dark winters, with rich biodiversity surviving in complete contrast to the barren expanses we know now. This inversion of expectations reveals that no environment is permanent. It highlights Earth's ability to transform, sometimes quickly, when the balance of greenhouse gases tips. Research continues to probe deeper into cause for chemical details. Plant tissue residues carry signals of how photosynthesis operated under high-latitude light cycles and how forests captured carbon. These details help scientists compare polar data with lower-latitude records, providing global perspectives on how greenhouse climates redistributed life across the continents. They are also crucial in predicting how today's warming might alter regions of Antarctica, giving more grounded expectations of how ice sheets could react. The Cretaceous forests buried under Antarctic ice sheets are among the clearest natural archives available for understanding climate sensitivity. They demonstrate that high carbon dioxide can transform even the poles into green, wet ecosystems. For scientists modeling Earth's future, they provide tangible and measurable evidence of how far change can extend. For non-specialists, they serve as a striking reminder that the Antarctic landscape has not always been what we see today and may not always remain so in the centuries to come. While fossils reveal a frozen record of forests and rivers lost for tens of millions of years, other discoveries concern liquid water still active beneath the ice. Recent surveys show that, beneath the frozen sheet, entire drainage systems continue to move, shaping Antarctica in ways that echo its ancient, wetter past. The expanding river beneath the ice. In 2022, scientists working with ice-penetrating radar made an unexpected discovery, a hidden river network stretching for hundreds of miles beneath Antarctica's ice sheet. Instead of isolated pockets of meltwater, what they revealed was a continuous system linking several subglacial lakes into one drainage basin. This challenged the long-held view of Antarctica's bedrock simply as a static base for ice. New data now suggests it functions more like an underground watershed, shifting and flowing far beneath the surface. By 2025, more detailed mapping, combining airborne radar, gravity measurements, and satellite observations, showed that this river system is even more extensive than first imagined. The main channel branches into tributaries that drain ice fields as large as entire European nations. Ancient surfaces, once carved by rivers tens of millions of years ago, guide the modern channels, creating a landscape of valleys now sealed under miles of ice. Instead of a frozen continent with occasional water pockets, Antarctica contains a vast and interconnected hydrological system that actively shapes how its ice moves. The river itself flows under unusual conditions. It is locked beneath nearly 2 miles of frozen ice, yet remains liquid, driven by pressure from the overlying ice sheet and by geothermal heat from the earth below. Where surface rivers depend on rainfall or snowmelt, these subglacial streams draw their power from ice weight and heat balance. Freshwater moves through buried valleys at scales not visible from above, surging through hidden pathways that researchers are only now beginning to trace in full. Scientists once assumed that lakes beneath the ice were independent, each isolated from the other. New surveys show that this is not the case. The tributaries uncovered in 2025 demonstrate that flow pathways connect regions once considered separate, allowing water transfer across great distances under the sheet. That interconnection means changes in one basin can ripple across others, complicating predictions of how glaciers will respond to warming. Traditional models that treated individual glaciers as independent units must be revised. since water beneath one may now affect the movement of another hundreds of kilometers away. These findings also highlight why hydrology matters for ice stability. Meltwater at the base of a glacier lowers friction, allowing ice to slide more easily toward the ocean. With more flow, the channels cut wider, carrying additional heat and further eroding surrounding ice. The result is a feedback loop. The more water moves, the faster ice detaches, increasing the speed at which vast sheets discharge into coastal seas. Rather than acting as passive drains, subglacial rivers behave as active accelerators of glacial retreat. In some cases, projections suggest particularly strong effects. Models of East Antarctica's Thwaites Glacier, one of the largest marine glaciers in the region, forecast that discharge beneath it could rise nearly fivefold by the end of this century under continued warming. Thwaites has long been identified as a potential weak point guarding large sections of the ice sheet. If meltwater outflow increases as simulations predict, it could lubricate the base so effectively that inland ice retreats at much faster rates than anticipated. Neighboring glaciers such as Denman are also drawing attention for similar vulnerabilities. These examples underscore that the river system is not just an academic finding, but a potential trigger for significant global consequences. To build these models, researchers rely on data from radar surveys mounted on aircraft, complemented by satellite measurements of ice surface elevation and gravity mapping. Together, these tools allow scientists to reconstruct drainage beneath the ice and detect how hidden basins connect. Some of the flat terrain now mapped across East Antarctica appears to be the preserved surface of major rivers that once flowed freely millions of years ago, before ice engulfed the continent. These fossil riverbeds act as platforms shaping where modern water pathways can expand today. Their survival demonstrates that Antarctica's hydrological story spans ancient greenhouse climates as well as present conditions. Although exact volumes are difficult to measure, model estimates suggest that in aggregate, Antarctica's subglacial systems may transport water at scales comparable to some large surface rivers. This volume, spread unseen beneath the continent, is enough to reduce friction for entire ice streams and alter their stability. Even without exact numbers, the comparison illustrates the degree of hidden influence operating beneath the ice sheet. Significance grows when these flows interact with coastal ice shelves, the floating extensions of glaciers that buttress the ice sheet from behind. The grounding lines, where ice transitions from resting on bedrock to floating on seawater, are especially sensitive. Extra water from beneath can undermine stability, tilting these regions toward thinning, cracking, or collapse. A weakened grounding line means inland ice can advance more quickly to the sea. The role of hidden subglacial discharge is therefore a crucial factor in ice shelf endurance, with meaningful implications for coastlines far beyond Antarctica. This system also reshapes how researchers understand past cycles of ice advance and retreat. Sediment cores from drainage outlets carry chemical markers washed from deep inland, suggesting that water has been reshaping Antarctica's base across multiple glacial cycles. The sediments even provide evidence of microbial life that adapted to these concealed rivers, feeding on minerals and gases in the darkness. These signs demonstrate that the system has a long and active history, linking geological, hydrological, and biological processes into one. Despite rapid progress, uncertainties remain. Antarctica's subglacial rivers still cannot be observed directly, meaning researchers must rely on indirect data and modeling. Each season of airborne and satellite surveys refines what is known, yet the complexity continues to outpace models. What once existed as speculation, a continental network of water moving at scale, has now been confirmed as a physical reality. The focus now is not whether this network exists, but how it will behave in a warming climate and how much faster it may accelerate ice discharge than expected. Understanding these patterns is not only of interest to scientists. The water coursing unseen beneath the ice is already tied to sea level rise being measured on distant coasts. It affects the design of sea defenses, urban planning, and even strategic policy for nations far from the southern continent. Each new survey adds urgency, signaling that hidden processes under the Antarctic ice are active today in shaping environments thousands of miles away. The expanding river system beneath Antarctica demonstrates how even unseen forces can alter the future of coastlines and societies. These are not oddities sealed away under the ice. They are conduits of change, capable of shortening the timescales for sea level rise by destabilizing glaciers that once seemed secure. And some of the largest glaciers, sitting directly atop such fragile foundations, show signs of retreat with consequences that scientists are only beginning to measure. The Doomsday Glacier Update. Among Antarctic glaciers, none commands more attention than Thwaites, ominously labeled the Doomsday Glacier. Its scale and location make it a keystone within West Antarctica. Acting as a giant brace, it slows adjoining ice streams and prevents them from flowing unchecked into the sea. If Thwaites were to retreat fully, the ice sheet behind it could be exposed, unleashing enough melt to drive global sea levels several meters higher. This potential makes every new measurement of its condition a matter of concern. In 2025, the most recent surveys added to that concern. Recent observations show Thwaites is retreating faster than many earlier models predicted a decade ago, prompting revised, shorter timelines in some scenarios. What was once cast as a slow-moving risk is now understood to be changing at a far greater pace. Central to this acceleration is the grounding line, the boundary where the glacier passes from resting on rock to floating on seawater. This line serves as an anchor point. Its retreat reduces the resistance that slows ice flow from inland. Once the grounding line starts moving inland, it encourages more ice to lift from bedrock and enter the ocean. That loss of buttressing creates a feedback loop. Thinner support allows more seawater to intrude, which weakens the shelf, which in turn speeds the discharge of inland ice. Researchers tracking Thwaites have documented that its grounding line has shifted by kilometers within just a few years, a pace far more rapid than anticipated. Each retreating step unlocks additional instability, confirming the glacier is not only shrinking, but also losing the structural features that kept it in check. The driving force behind this process is not simply air temperature at the surface, but the intrusion of warmer ocean water from below. Circulation patterns direct relatively warm deep water into the cavity under Thwaites' ice shelf, where even a few degrees above freezing is sufficient to eat away at the base. This basal melting thins the shelf from beneath, fractures its structure, and leaves towering ice front cliffs vulnerable to collapse. When collapses occur, resistance to inland ice flow is reduced even further. Scientists describe this as a chain reaction. Basal melt reduces shelf stability, which weakens grounding, which accelerates glacier discharge. For communities thousands of miles from Antarctica, the link is clear. These processes shorten planning horizons for rising seas in ways coastal defenses are struggling to match. To quantify these dynamics, missions in 2025 combined satellite interferometry with autonomous underwater vehicles navigating beneath the shelf. These platforms mapped fine details of the grounding zone, identifying hotspots where ice thinning is most severe. They also measured surface speeds above, showing Thwaites accelerating as drag below declines. Together, these datasets feed into models that now update collapse scenarios on timescales far shorter than those used in older planning documents. The result is not a singular forecast, but a family of simulations, many of which suggest larger change unfolding within decades if warming persists. The significance of Thwaites lies not only in its individual contribution, but also in its role as a gatekeeper for the West Antarctic ice sheet. Alone, its full retreat would raise seas by more than half a meter, yet the ice it restrains could add several meters more. That is why its instability is seen as a pivot point with global consequences. Researchers stress that exact timelines remain unsettled, with some model runs pointing to centuries while others, incorporating new 2000 and 2025 data, indicate the possibility of far more dramatic shifts within the span of this century under high warming conditions. In either case, the risk profile has tilted toward urgency. An important feedback identified in 2025 highlights how the glacier's own meltwater contributes to its decline. As ice melts and freshwater is released at depth, it alters local ocean structure. These changes effectively draw in additional warm water beneath the shelf, sustaining and enhancing basal melt. The glacier, in effect, creates the conditions for its own further retreat. This mechanism illustrates why predicting future sea level contributions from Thwaites is not as simple as extrapolating existing melt rates. The system amplifies itself, introducing new accelerants that compound instability. For coastal regions, the implications are immediate. Projections of sea level rise inform infrastructure standards, from drainage systems to housing developments. When estimates of Thwaites stability shift toward shorter timelines, planning cycles that once spanned centuries must adapt to the possibility of substantial changes within living memory. Even if the most extreme outcomes remain uncertain, the range of possibilities has narrowed in a concerning direction. Uncertainty does not mean comfort. It now means that emergency planners must consider wider margins for risk. A further layer of complexity arises from interactions between Thwaites and its neighboring glaciers. With its ice shelf degrading, the mechanical hold once slowing Pine Island Glacier and others in its vicinity is weakening. This creates the possibility of cascading retreat, where destabilization spreads through linked systems. It is analogous to removing a structural support from a dam. Failure in one section increases stress elsewhere. This systemic perspective is now central to Antarctic science, recognizing that glaciers cannot be viewed in isolation, but as participants in a connected network driven by shared ocean and atmospheric forces. Still, researchers emphasize that while trends are troubling, forecasting exact end states remains highly model-dependent. Factors such as variability in ocean circulation, regional wind shifts, and potential stabilization thresholds introduce uncertainty. Yet the consistency across different approaches, whether radar data, ice thickness measurements, or ocean probes, points to Thwaites as one of the fastest changing glaciers anywhere on the continent. That consistency is what gives scientists confidence that the direction of change is clear, even if the final timing is not. For policymakers, this creates a dilemma. Projects designed for gradual change must now account for scenarios that arrive faster than expected. Discussion at international climate meetings increasingly cites Thwaites as emblematic of unpredictable risk, a system capable of reshaping coastlines globally, yet too remote for direct mitigation. The emphasis has shifted towards adaptation, shore defenses, relocation planning, and contingency frameworks, because the glacier's changes occur regardless of immediate reductions in emissions. Cutting future carbon output still matters immensely for long-term stability, but what Thwaites shows is that near-term adaptation is no longer optional. The Doomsday Glacier has therefore become something of a case study in cascading thresholds. Its retreat illustrates how warm currents, grounding line migration, shelf collapse, and feedback loops all interact to accelerate change once conditions align. It is not a single failure, but a combination of mechanisms acting in sequence. Understanding that interplay, rather than oversimplifying it, is at the heart of the current research effort. The larger meaning of Thwaites' decline extends beyond sea level forecasts. It reminds us of the hidden systems operating beneath Antarctica's ice, forces that were largely invisible until technology enabled their measurement. Each new discovery underscores how little of the continent's deeper structure is known, and how much may yet lie concealed under its frozen surface. That recognition points researchers toward mysteries even older and grander than the modern ice sheet, hidden in the foundations of the continent itself. Magnetic anomalies below the ice. Beneath the ice sheet of East Antarctica, researchers are now using magnetic surveys to reveal patterns that cannot be seen by the human eye. In 2025, high-resolution datasets provided new evidence of magnetic anomalies, variations in the magnetic properties of buried rock, stretching across immense distances under the frozen landscape. Since direct sampling of the continent's bedrock remains extremely limited, measurements like these are one of the few tools available to understand what lies hidden far below the surface. The most recent results give a much clearer view of East Antarctica's deep geological structures, showing an intricate record of tectonic activity and crust formation over billions of years. Among the most revealing discoveries are anomalies aligned with an ancient continental collision thought to have occurred more than 1 billion years ago. This signature links East Antarctica with fragments of crust that once formed part of supercontinents such as Rodinia. The alignment strengthens reconstructions of how Earth's continents assembled, broke apart, and reformed into later configurations like Gondwana. Although no one can yet hold these rocks in hand, magnetic data tells the story indirectly. Anomalies show changes in intensity, orientation, and thickness, which geologists interpret to map the boundaries of old cratons and the scar lines of collisions. This positions Antarctica as a crucial piece of the puzzle in understanding Earth's tectonic history, despite the challenge of studying it through miles of ice. Layers of magnetic signals also tie directly into major Antarctic features. Patterns correlate with regions underlying the Transantarctic Mountains and extend into zones associated with the West Antarctic Rift System. Each anomaly points to a different stage in the continent's assembly: remnants of mountain-building events, deep rifts opened by later spreading, and volcanic systems buried long before the modern ice sheet appeared. Together they create a picture of East Antarctica as a varied and active terrain, a stark contrast to the uniform frozen plain visible from above. The 2025 BedMap 3 models, which integrate magnetic readings with radar and seismic imaging, show a level of detail never achieved before. Valleys, ranges, and craters hidden under the ice are resolved into three-dimensional maps that geologists can compare with ancient tectonic records elsewhere in the world. Part of what makes these anomalies particularly intriguing is that some resemble the magnetic signatures associated with mineral belts on other continents. Distinctive signals are consistent with iron-rich rocks and crustal structures that in other regions can host valuable deposits such as rare earth elements. However, scientists stress that these findings do not confirm the presence of commercially extractable resources beneath Antarctica. Without drilling, there can be no proof of ores, and current international law explicitly prohibits mineral exploitation. The Madrid Protocol to the Antarctic Treaty designates the continent as a natural reserve, banning resource extraction. For now, these anomalies remain subjects for research rather than development. Their main value lies in advancing geological understanding and in refining models of how ice sheets rest and flow over diverse bedrock. This last point has immediate implications. The composition and shape of the bedrock beneath an ice sheet strongly influence how ice moves above it. Areas underlain by hard, elevated ridges act as anchors that pin glaciers in place, while low, smooth basins allow glaciers to slide faster toward the sea. By incorporating magnetic data into ice flow models, scientists can more accurately predict where the Antarctic ice sheet is most vulnerable. In that sense, mapping anomalies is not just about piecing together tectonic history, but also about improving projections of sea level rise today. A clear picture of the geology below the ice translates directly into a clearer picture of how the ice will behave. Beyond ice dynamics, the anomalies provide evidence for volcanoes and volcanically active regions buried under the Antarctic crust. Magnetized rocks formed during eruptions leave lasting signatures even after the surface is erased by ice. Locating and dating these buried volcanic centers provides key information about when eruptions occurred and how they shaped the continent's crustal structure. Combined with geothermal heat flux estimates, these findings help explain why certain glaciers thin more rapidly from below. In this way, mapping magnetism reveals not just ancient supercontinent collisions, but also volcanic patterns that influence melting ice in the present. Technological advances have made it possible to chart this hidden landscape at a level once unimaginable. Airborne geophysical platforms, flying in tight grids, measure subtle fluctuations in the magnetic field. High-resolution satellites provide global coverage with growing accuracy, while radar soundings penetrate kilometers of ice to constrain the thickness of geological units. When these datasets are combined through computer modeling, scientists can distinguish dense crustal blocks, fault zones, and volcanic belts with remarkable clarity. The integration of magnetic and seismic data presents Antarctica's under ice geology almost as if it were an exposed landscape, carved into valleys and mountains, though visible only through instruments. These maps underscore how interconnected Earth systems are. Buried faults identified from anomalies correspond with zones where subglacial rivers preferentially flow. Volcanic ridges influence how basal meltwater spreads beneath the ice. Even microbial habitats discovered in subglacial lakes link indirectly to geological features that channel water and nutrients. The anomalies become one strand in a much broader analysis, pointing to Antarctica as both a geological archive of deep time and an active landscape still shaping ice, water, and life. The mention of potential mineral belts, however, inevitably raises policy and ethical questions. Governments and institutions recognize that the presence of iron-rich crust or rare earth signatures beneath Antarctica could spark future interest. Yet under current law, exploitation remains expressly forbidden. For now, such findings are reminders of the need for vigilance. The conversation is less about immediate extraction and more about stewardship, how international agreements will hold under rising pressures for strategic resources. That makes the ongoing interpretation of anomalies as much a political concern as it is a scientific one, even though the scientific consensus agrees that Antarctic minerals remain off-limits. Condensing these debates into a single point clarifies the stakes. The Antarctic Treaty positions the continent as a global commons dedicated to research, not profit. Discoveries of potential geological wealth test the strength of those principles, but they do not alter the present reality. Antarctica's role is to provide knowledge. Pursuing resource extraction would risk contaminating pristine subglacial lakes, polluting ecosystems adapted to extremes, and erasing unrepeatable geological archives. Recognizing this, researchers emphasize that magnetic anomalies are valuable less for what they might contain than for what they teach about Earth's past and the ways ice interacts with the land below. Deepest significance of the 2025 surveys lies in reconstruction of tectonic history. By comparing East Antarctic anomalies with signatures mapped in Australia, India, and Africa, geologists refine models of ancient supercontinents. Alignments show where Antarctica once fit against other landmasses and how rifts split them apart. These patterns explain not only Antarctica's formation, but also the evolution of global plate systems stretching across billions of years. In this way, the frozen continent transforms from a blank white spot on maps into an essential chapter in Earth's geological story. Collectively, the findings dismantle the idea that East Antarctica is a monotonous base under ice. Instead, it is revealed as a terrain of rift zones, mountain chains, and volcanic arcs, with each phase encoded in magnetic signals. Every survey sharpens this invisible map, one that is essential both for reconstructing tectonic evolution and for predicting the response of ice sheets to a warming climate. While questions of mineral wealth capture public imagination, their scientific importance rests first on explaining how Antarctica came to be and how its hidden structures continue to influence the present. As magnetic surveys refine the picture of East Antarctica's crust, they also highlight regions linked to past volcanic activity. These results suggest that beneath the cold exterior, geothermal processes have played a persistent role in shaping the ice sheet above. That recognition points researchers toward another dimension of Antarctic science, where buried volcanic systems become central to understanding both ancient tectonics and modern ice stability. Volcanoes hidden under the ice sheet. Beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet, scientists have now confirmed one of the most unexpected discoveries of recent years: a vast field of volcanoes concealed under kilometers of ice. Long suspected from indirect evidence such as geothermal heat flow, unusual seismic signals, and localized zones of rapid ice thinning, these hidden peaks were brought into focus during a 2025 seismic survey. The survey produced the clearest image yet of an extensive volcanic province, showing that Antarctica's frozen surface conceals one of the densest volcanic regions on Earth. The new data nearly tripled the number of known volcanoes in West Antarctica. The peaks identified range from modest cones just 100 meters high to massive structures soaring more than 3,000 meters, similar in scale to the great volcanic ranges of the Swiss Alps. Invisible to satellites that can only image the surface, these features were revealed through seismic techniques that trace how energy waves pass through rock and ice. Where the signals shifted, scientists could reconstruct the outlines of volcanoes unseen for millennia. Viewed as a whole, the patterns show that West Antarctica is underpinned by the West Antarctic Rift System, a geologic stretch more than 3,500 kilometers long. Rather than a stable block of crust, the region emerges as a fracture-ridden volcanic landscape hidden beneath the ice sheet. What makes this finding important is not the possibility of towering eruptions breaking through the ice, but the heat these volcanoes introduce into their environment. Even dormant volcanic systems release geothermal energy, warming the base of the surrounding ice. When meltwater forms beneath glaciers, it flows outward, lubricating their motion toward the sea. In this way, subglacial volcanism becomes a factor in ice stability. Climate models must now account for more variable geothermal flux, recognizing that regional heat sources exist beneath critical glaciers such as Thwaites and Pine Island. This connection between buried peaks and melt rates helps explain why some parts of Antarctica thin far faster than others. Scientists emphasize caution when interpreting the threat these volcanoes pose. The heavy weight of the ice sheet, often 2 kilometers thick or more, acts as a stabilizer, suppressing eruptions by keeping pressure on underlying magma. That is why many of these volcanoes may have remained dormant for long stretches of time. Still, thinning ice reduces that pressure, and in principle, it could alter volcanic behavior. Researchers do not treat this as a near-term prediction of eruptions, but as a possible risk that requires study. The key point is that ice loss does not simply reshape the surface, it also alters the geologic balance beneath. This interaction creates the potential for feedback loops. As climate warming thins the ice, the stabilizing pressure weakens. In theory, such changes could encourage magma systems to reactivate, adding new heat to the base of the ice sheet. That heat would generate meltwater, further accelerating the flow of glaciers into the sea. Though the full sequence is not guaranteed, the mechanism is robust enough that Antarctic science now treats variability in geothermal heat as an additional driver of future sea level rise. Unlike surface warming or ocean currents, it is an internal factor, hidden below, but just as capable of influencing outcomes. The Rift System's volcanic alignment also helps build a picture of the continent's geologic past. Chains of volcanic peaks trace how the crust stretched and fractured during the breakup of ancient supercontinents. These patterns provide evidence of where continents separated, how tectonic activity unfolded, and why Antarctica's crust differs from one region to another. At the same time, these features explain why modern ice behavior varies. Glaciers overlying geothermal hotspots encounter basal melting that speeds their retreat, while glaciers overlying colder, stable crust remain less active. In one line of evidence, the Rift System offers both a record of Earth's history and a guide to understanding ongoing ice dynamics. Some of the detected cones are colossal, with heights rivaling major continental volcanoes worldwide. Their scale raises questions about how often they were active in the past and whether traces of eruption events are preserved in Antarctic sediments. Researchers are now looking for ash layers or chemical signals in ice cores that might correspond to hidden eruptions. If found, such evidence would demonstrate that subglacial volcanism has long been a recurring influence on the continent, shaping both its geology and its ice. When volcanic systems do interact with the overlying ice, the effects can be unusual. Lava in these conditions might never reach the surface, but instead melt vast cavities beneath the ice, generating lakes or channels of liquid water. Gas emissions could alter water chemistry, while sudden injections of heat destabilize ice shelves from their base. Some voids already mapped beneath the ice sheet are thought to have formed in this way, where geothermal activity hollowed out chambers that later filled with water. Understanding these processes is critical because they highlight how volcanism can accelerate melt without producing any dramatic surface event visible to observers. For scientists developing projections of sea level rise, these discoveries require a recalibration. Previous models often assumed that geothermal inputs remained stable over millennia. The identification of so many unknown volcanic systems beneath West Antarctica challenges that assumption. Now, researchers must integrate variable geothermal flux and potential shifts in volcanic behavior into climate ice models. Early simulations suggest that even modest pulses of additional heat could change meltwater production enough to affect glacier flow rates. That outcome may not determine the entire future of the ice sheet on its own, but it is a factor large enough to influence timelines for sea level contribution. The broader lesson is that Antarctica is not a passive landscape. The continent's ice rests atop a crust still marked by tectonic extension and volcanism. Human-driven climate change intersects with these deeper forces, creating conditions in which feedbacks can occur. Warming oceans erode ice shelves from below, atmospheric heating drives surface melt, and beneath it all, geothermal hotspots inject pulses of heat that alter basal conditions. This convergence of natural and human-driven processes makes West Antarctica one of the most dynamic and uncertain regions of the planet. At the surface, Antarctica presents itself as a silent white expanse where change seems glacially slow. Yet the discoveries of 2025 show that under the ice, the Earth is still active. Dozens of volcanoes, many previously invisible, stand in chains beneath the frozen shield. Their presence underscores that what appears stable from above is underpinned by forces capable of reshaping the ice and influencing the oceans. Scientists may not forecast imminent eruptions, but they no longer view West Antarctica's volcanic province as a passive background. It is part of the real system that determines how fast glaciers can retreat and how high seas might rise. This recognition expands the scope of Antarctic research. It reminds us that beneath the continent's ice, hidden forces continue to operate, sometimes quietly, sometimes dramatically, shaping outcomes as significant as the stability of global coastlines. Yet Antarctica's secrets are not confined to the land beneath the ice. Equally remarkable things are being uncovered in its waters, where life has adapted to conditions as extreme as any on Earth. Newly discovered species in Antarctica's deep ocean. Far below Antarctica's ice, the Southern Ocean continues to reveal species that science had never documented before. Over the past several years, expeditions using remotely operated vehicles and deep-sea camera tows have provided glimpses of animals inhabiting areas once entirely hidden from human view. With each discovery, researchers are forced to expand their understanding of just how complex and enduring Antarctic marine ecosystems can be, even in environments marked by darkness, pressure, and extreme cold. Recent campaigns in 2024 and 2025 delivered several of the most striking examples. Among them is the Antarctic strawberry feather star, a species described by researchers working with the University of California, San Diego. This peculiar animal bristles with 20 long appendages radiating from a central body. To divers and ROV pilots observing it through camera feeds, its overall shape recalled the surface of a strawberry, which gave the species its name. Beyond appearance, its importance lies in taxonomy. Before its classification, scientists believed this group contained far fewer species. The addition of the strawberry feather star and its relatives expanded the Antarctic feather star family to 8 recognized species, overturning assumptions about its limited diversity and demonstrating that even groups thought well-documented remain incomplete. Another breakthrough came not from the identification of a new species, but from the revelation of extraordinary abundance. In the Weddell Sea, live cameras towing across the seafloor revealed an icefish breeding colony of unparalleled scale. An estimated 60 million nests sprawled across a wide zone, each constructed from pebbles and guarded by a vigilant adult. Previous documentation had identified colonies numbering in the dozens, or at the largest, in the thousands. The finding of tens of millions of ordered nests, each with developing eggs, stunned marine biologists. Far from being a sparse, precarious population, These icefish were revealed to reproduce at a scale comparable to the largest vertebrate gatherings ever recorded. The discovery raised questions about how such immense colonies sustain themselves and what vulnerabilities they may face should local ecosystems shift. Other deep-sea observations underscore just how unusual Antarctic adaptations can be. Some of the fish retrieved or recorded use antifreeze proteins in their blood, preventing ice crystals from forming internally and allowing them to function in waters that stay below the normal freezing point of fresh water. This trait is unique to high-latitude fishes and has become a key topic for molecular biologists studying proteins that remain stable at freezing temperatures. Meanwhile, organisms more rooted to the seafloor, such as certain sponges, are suspected to live for hundreds of years, growing slowly across centuries while enduring environmental cycles invisible within a human timeframe. Taken together, these traits reveal not just novelty, but mechanisms of survival that stabilize ecosystems across the deep Southern Ocean. Exploration has also revealed rich structural habitats at depths exceeding 1,000 meters. ROVs deployed in 2024 by the Schmidt Ocean Institute's research vessel Volker 2 documented coral communities spreading across the seabed. These corals provide frames for other marine organisms, while sponges and other sessile life forms become substrates hosting smaller species. These assemblages demonstrate the presence of complete ecosystems in zones once assumed to be barren. The observations from the Volker 2 were particularly important because the team gained access to newly exposed seafloor following the carving of large icebergs, effectively offering a first look into areas untouched for thousands of years. For marine science, this opened an entirely new frontier of biodiversity hidden behind ice barriers. Each of these findings points back to the same conclusion. The Southern Ocean is both understudied and remarkably rich in life. While much public focus falls on whales, penguins, and seals at the surface, the majority of Antarctic biodiversity lies beneath invertebrates, fish communities, and entire ecosystems aligned along the seafloor. Identifying a strawberry feather star that reshapes taxonomies or an icefish colony that spans as far as researchers can scan both highlight how limited previous assumptions were. Ongoing expeditions provide snapshots, but most of the continent's waters remain unsurveyed, meaning that countless other species and colonies almost certainly await description. Research into these communities serves practical goals as well as scientific curiosity. The antifreeze proteins from Antarctic fish, for example, hold potential for applications ranging from cryogenic storage to industrial biotechnology. Sponges and corals that thrive under high pressure and low temperature may produce biochemicals useful for pharmaceuticals. These are not incidental curiosities, but functional adaptations tested over evolutionary time in extreme conditions. The biology of Antarctic species therefore contributes to human understanding of life's chemistry as much as it builds an ecological record of polar seas. There are planetary implications, too. Antarctic fish, feather stars, and sponges demonstrate that ecosystems can stabilize where light is minimal or absent by drawing energy from nutrients and chemical exchanges rather than direct photosynthesis. Just as subglacial microbes inform thinking about life beneath the icy crusts of Europa or Enceladus, deep-sea Antarctic species reveal how animal communities can build complexity in complete darkness. Probes looking for extraterrestrial habitability now rely on lessons from places like the Weddell Sea or Antarctic Shelf to shape what scenarios they consider plausible. Yet the strength of these ecosystems is matched by their sensitivity. Many of the species discovered or described grow slowly, reproduce under delicate conditions, and occupy narrow environmental niches. Losing stability in sea ice cover, currents, or nutrient availability could endanger entire communities. The vast icefish nursery, for instance, depends on oxygen-rich waters and stable seafloor environments. Should warming currents alter oxygen circulation or sediment conditions, reproductive success could decline sharply. Similarly, coral and sponge frameworks that took centuries to develop may not recover in the face of rapid disturbance. For conservationists, these discoveries become more than milestones of exploration. They form evidence of what stands to be lost without careful stewardship. Regions once inaccessible are now within reach of expanding human activity, from scientific expeditions to potential fishing ventures. Protecting them is essential not just for the survival of unusual species, but for the preservation of evolutionary archives that inform science across disciplines. The Antarctic Treaty System currently places limits on exploitation, yet rising interest in southern waters illustrates why vigilance remains necessary. Each new organism identified is not just a biological entry, but also a reminder of how fragile and irreplaceable the system is. The past few seasons of research have underscored just how incomplete our map of Antarctica's depths remains. Every year seems to reveal something that overturns assumptions, whether it is a feather star redesigning a taxonomic group or tens of millions of fish nests stretching across the seabed. For the scientists involved, these are less final answers than starting points, introductions to biological systems that demand decades of follow-up study. Together, they portray the Southern Ocean as a frontier of knowledge, where entire ecosystems remain scarcely touched by global science. That perspective leads to a broader realization. Antarctica is not only a place of ice and geological mystery, but also a reservoir of biodiversity with lessons for climate change, biology, and habitability across the cosmos. Operating in darkness and under pressures that would crush most surface organisms, its species have carved out strategies that endure. Their resilience is both inspiring and precarious. The very conditions that define their evolution are beginning to shift, whether from climate warming, ice shelf retreat, or human approach. Without careful governance, some of these lineages may be disrupted before science fully understands them. As exploration continues, researchers piece together the role these communities play in the wider planetary system, how they shape nutrient currents, how they lock away carbon, and how they embody survival in extremes. What becomes clear is that Antarctica's seas must be considered not as peripheral, but as central to global biodiversity and climate stability. Each coral, fish, and sponge is part of a lineage refined across deep time, now standing at a crossroads of environmental change. And if such newly uncovered life demonstrates how much is still to be learned from beneath Antarctica's seas, it also foreshadows the equally dramatic revelations coming from within its vast, hidden ice. Gigantic ice caverns forming below glaciers. In 2025, radar mapping revealed striking evidence that Antarctica's glaciers conceal vast underground structures, large melt cavities and voids extending for hundreds of meters beneath the ice. Some of these hidden spaces are so expansive that their scale is comparable to man-made skyscrapers. They are not small, incidental hollows, but extensive features created where heat and meltwater carve through the base of the glaciers. What matters most is not their size alone, but the way they change the forces acting on the surrounding ice. These cavities concentrate stress and store pressurized water, turning them into active agents of instability rather than inert gaps. Cavities develop through a combination of basal melting from ocean heat and surface runoff that drains to the base of the glacier. Over time, water pathways enlarge, expanding hollows that can span kilometers. The water trapped inside these voids is under high pressure because it cannot escape easily. That pressure pushes outward on the surrounding ice walls, prying apart cracks and straining the roofs above the cavities. Radar and seismic measurements now detect fractures forming above several such features, showing that their presence undermines the integrity of the ice shelves that act as protective barriers for inland glaciers. Models had long assumed such processes would evolve gradually, unfolding over centuries. The discovery of these cavities has complicated that expectation. Instead of steady thinning, cavities produce concentrated stress, allowing localized failure to happen more quickly than anticipated. In some model runs and observed drainage events, cavity pressure has shortened the timescales for destabilization at vulnerable outlets, making the possibility of rapid structural change plausible within decades. This does not mean Antarctica's entire ice sheet is about to collapse, but it does shift projections more toward near-term risk for specific glaciers known to overlie large voids. One mechanism of concern is how these cavities interact with subglacial water flows. Meltwater under pressure can migrate suddenly, draining from one cavity into another or out through fractures into the sea. When this happens, the process acts like a release valve, altering the glacier's behavior above. Studies of subglacial lakes elsewhere in Antarctica have shown that these drainage events can lead to sudden spikes in ice velocity, as reduced basal friction lets ice slide forward more freely. Applied to the newly detected cavities, this same principle suggests that once draining begins, ice movement can accelerate sharply in localized zones, destabilizing the flow of entire ice streams. Observations above known cavities already show telltale depressions on the glacier surface, detected by satellite altimetry. These sags signal that the support beneath is hollowed out. When combined with repeat ice-penetrating radar profiles, the picture is clear. Some cavities are expanding year by year. Seismic soundings confirm the boundaries where solid ice transitions to liquid zones, reinforcing radar data with independent measurements. Together, these methods provide the first multi-layered look at how structural voids are reshaping the base of Antarctica's glaciers. The pattern reshapes understanding of basal melt, the process by which glaciers thin from below. Warm ocean water intrusions remain critical drivers, but the geometry of cavities means melt rates are not uniform. Instead, erosion concentrates in specific segments, pushing stress upward through the glacier. This explains why some outlets, like Thwaites and its neighbors, show thinning much faster than estimates predicted. Cavities channel melt and accelerate failure in non-linear ways that older models did not account for. The consequences spread far beyond the cavities themselves. Many affected glaciers are those with large floating ice shelves that currently act as anchors holding back inland ice. If cavities undermine those ice shelves and drive fractures to the surface, the result could be the disintegration of buttressing supports. Without them, upstream glaciers can surge forward more quickly, releasing vast volumes of ice into the sea. In this way, the localized process of cavity formation may lead to regional chain reactions that influence global sea level rise. Scientists describe the cavities as functioning like pressure cookers. Water accumulates inside, the pressure increases, and eventually it must escape. When it does, the outflow is not gradual but forceful, opening new cracks along its course and creating additional voids. This cycle, filling, pressurizing, draining, means damage to the ice is both steady and punctuated by bursts that add unpredictability. Each sudden drainage leaves a more fractured glacier, primed for faster loss in the next phase. Field teams are combining airborne radar surveys with satellite monitoring to follow these developments. The datasets from 2025 showed that cavities are not only larger than expected, but also more widespread. Some stretch for kilometers beneath a glacier front, linking multiple regions into one unstable zone. Far from being rare features, they may be a common aspect of Antarctica's undersides, requiring scientists to update their models of the entire ice sheet system. This re-evaluation has major consequences for global sea level forecasts. Older models assumed that basal melt acted evenly across the base of glaciers, leading to gradual change. The reality shown by cavities is different: localized, amplified failure points that accelerate collapse timelines. Revised projections must now include the possibility of rapid destabilization spreading through critical outlets. That adjustment has already caught the attention of planners and policymakers, who see defenses designed for slow sea rise potentially overtaken by faster events. For coastal communities across the globe, these findings give tangible urgency to Antarctic science. Sea defenses, infrastructure development, and migration planning all rely on realistic timelines for sea level change. If cavities accelerate failures within decades rather than centuries, strategies must change accordingly. Governments cannot treat Antarctic melt as a slow backdrop. It has become a near-term factor shaping urban decisions. At the same time, research continues to emphasize the limits of current observation. Cavities beneath kilometers of ice cannot be mapped comprehensively in a single survey. Data is pieced together across seasons, and unknown voids may still exist beneath unexplored zones. What 2025 revealed may therefore be only the beginning of a broader recognition that Antarctica's entire structural base is riddled with dynamic, water-pressurized features. Perhaps the most important scientific conclusion is that these are not passive hollows, but active structures that continually reshape the glaciers above them. Their scale, growth, and pressure mean they operate like hidden engines, unseen yet powerful. They underscore how much of the continent's future depends on processes concealed far below. Modern technology has only just begun to expose how such cavities form and evolve, and their discovery reminds researchers that critical forces in Earth's system may remain concealed until revealed by the right tools. By exposing how hidden voids threaten the structural stability of Antarctica's ice sheet, these surveys expand the sense of what might lie unseen beneath the continent. They raise new questions about what else could be buried under its frozen cover, questions not only geological, but potentially archaeological, as radar imaging continues to detect surprising outlines preserved deep below the ice. Archaeological clues beneath the ice. Beneath Antarctica's ice, new radar imaging in 2025 revealed entire landscapes that have been sealed off for tens of millions of years. Far from smooth or featureless, the data showed plateaus cut by valleys, long river basins, and mountain ridges preserved in fine detail beneath miles of overlying ice. These ancient terrains are not visible to the human eye, yet the radar maps brought them sharply into focus. For geologists, they provide a rare archive of the continent's warmer, pre-glacial history. For archaeologists, however, the discovery has raised more speculative questions about whether such buried worlds could ever yield signs of cultural traces. Research teams emphasize that no artifacts or evidence of early human presence have been recovered from Antarctica. The official record of exploration only begins with known maritime expeditions in the last few centuries. Still, the preservation of entire valleys beneath the ice has sparked debate. Some argue that if glacial transport carried soil, sediments, or organic material across the continent, it may have entombed it within these frozen vaults. Could transient visitors, or even long-distance seafarers, have left material traces that remain locked away? The idea remains highly speculative, and researchers note that it would require extraordinary evidence to move from possibility to proof. Current science prioritizes reconstructing ancient landscapes and past ecosystems, not searching for archaeological relics. The renewed discussion partly stems from how intact the subglacial landscapes appear to be. Certain valleys mapped in the 2025 BedMap 3 survey stretch hundreds of kilometers, with drainage networks and ridgelines preserved as if they were frozen in time. At Durham University and collaborating centers, scientists have used this data to trace fluvial surfaces, evidence of ancient rivers that once shaped Antarctica's terrain before the ice advanced. Some of these valleys may date back 30 million years or more, meaning they encapsulate conditions that predate not just Antarctica's ice sheet, but many major evolutionary milestones. In this context, the primary scientific aim is paleoclimate reconstruction. These terrains record how Antarctica shifted from a temperate region capable of supporting forests and rivers to the frozen desert of today. For archaeologists, the intrigue lies in what these records suggest about habitability. If Antarctica once possessed flowing rivers, stable soils, and vegetation, it was not always inaccessible. The fossilized roots, spores, and pollen recovered from earlier cores across other parts of the continent confirm that it hosted rich ecosystems during the mid-Cretaceous and into warmer intervals of the Cenozoic. Those conditions provided corridors where animals and plants thrived, and perhaps, though this is entirely unproven, environments where early humans or their ancestors could theoretically have explored had they ranged so far south. Most archaeologists regard the prospect as unsubstantiated, but the discovery of preserved valleys forces the question back into view: what exactly lies beneath? Skeptics urge restraint. Radar data alone cannot distinguish cultural structures from natural geology. Many features that appear orderly in scans are the product of tectonics or erosion long before humans existed. Comparisons with past archaeological surprises, sites once dismissed as impossible, later found to hold evidence of migration, carry some weight, but they do not provide justification for assuming Antarctic occupation. Most experts agree that the physical evidence at hand points instead toward fossilized ecosystems and paleoclimatic markers, not material culture. Any suggestion that ancient peoples reached Antarctica remains a research question rather than a credible claim. Practical and ethical barriers reinforce this caution. The Antarctic Treaty prohibits mineral exploitation and heavily restricts disruptive exploration. Proposals to drill through thick ice layers directly into suspected subglacial basins face legal, financial, and environmental hurdles comparable to launching deep space missions. The risk of introducing contamination to pristine ecosystems, displacing microbes, or altering water chemistry in isolated lakes means archaeologists cannot simply extract cores in pursuit of artifacts. Even radar and satellite work, the least invasive methods, require immense logistical infrastructure. For now, speculation about archaeology remains secondary to the broader science of mapping and conserving these unique landscapes. What makes these landscapes important is their ability to record Earth's environmental history. Subglacial basins act like geological archives, capturing signals of past ice advance and retreat cycles. The sediments beneath valleys hold chemical fingerprints of ancient climates, while their overall shape allows researchers to test when ice sheets expanded and how quickly they grew. As geologists and glaciologists refine this picture, paleobiologists see the same buried surfaces as potential repositories of preserved ecosystems. Long-extinct plants or microbes may be revealed in frozen soils, providing further insight into how life adapted during Antarctica's transitions. These are not distant side questions. They are the central reasons such mapping projects have received global attention. Still, the intrigue lingers at the edges of science. If seafaring civilizations like the Polynesians navigated great southern distances using only stars and currents, could earlier mariners elsewhere have glimpsed Antarctica's coast before it froze over entirely? If so, might they have left cultural traces on surrounding islands or the fringe of the continent itself? Mainstream archaeology treats this with caution, classing it as conjecture until definitive artifacts surface. At most, radar discoveries reopen the question as one deserving careful attention should new physical evidence ever emerge. For now, speculation remains just that, an expression of curiosity about how far back human footprints might one day extend. The conversation also intersects with climate research in more direct ways. By proving that buried valleys exist in preserved form, the radar surveys give scientists new benchmarks for calibrating models of ice sheet behavior. If the timing of river incision and valley formation can be reconstructed, it tells glaciologists when ice advanced, when it retreated, and at what pace. That information strengthens predictions of current ice sheet stability. High-resolution radar mosaics, when tied to sediment cores in the future, could unlock a timeline of continental change more precise than ever before. In this sense, their true power is as records of paleoclimate, not as speculative archaeological sites. Researchers involved in the 2025 surveys continue to stress this distinction. The detection of buried landscapes matters first and foremost for understanding Earth's climate system. These ice-sealed valleys and mountains preserve information about rainfall, river flow, vegetation, and long-term atmosphere ice feedbacks. If artifacts ever were discovered in such contexts, they would transform archaeology. But the immediate reality is that these valleys are natural archives of environmental change. Their value lies in what they reveal about the past climates that shaped the planet and about the possible trajectories we now face. The broader lesson is that Antarctica still contains landscapes we have only just begun to describe. Some appear pristine, unchanged since long before humans existed. They represent one of the last great unopened chapters of Earth's history. Whether studied for geology, paleobiology, or in the speculative hope of archaeology, they reinforce the vast unknown that continues beneath the southern ice. Their preservation means that when access becomes possible, if it can be achieved responsibly, they may provide discoveries with global impact. For now, the landscapes remain locked away, their outlines visible only as faint signals traced through ice sheets miles thick. The debate continues among archaeologists and historians, but the consensus among scientists is clear. These hidden terrains matter most as climate archives, not cultural sites. Their discovery underscores how much of Earth's story is still untold, demanding patience and restraint while technology slowly improves our reach. Antarctica, therefore, stands not only as the coldest and least accessible continent, but also as one of the richest repositories of information about life and climate through deep time. Its ancient valleys, rivers, and plateaus remain frozen in place, awaiting future study. That recognition provides a bridge to the larger reality emerging from all recent Antarctic research. The continent is neither static nor peripheral, but central to understanding both Earth's past and its future. Antarctica represents two extremes at once. It preserves ancient forests, rivers, and ecosystems that show how the continent was once green, and it now drives urgent risk as its glaciers thin and pour into the sea. Both lessons matter, reminding us that Earth's past and future are tied together under the ice. What happens in Antarctica directly reshapes coastlines worldwide, forcing new decisions about sea level defense and long-term planning. Which discovery surprised you most? The hidden forests, the subglacial rivers, or the shipwreck? Share your thoughts below. Recent field seasons and high-resolution maps have already changed how scientists forecast both sea level rise and ancient climates.